Well, hello there. Welcome to Critical Wave Theory. And if you've ever heard a deep bass line, some echoing drums, and a reggae rhythm, then you've kind of explored the sound of Niney the Observer a little bit. That's right. Today we're stepping into the roots of reggae and dub music, into a sound that feels spacious, heavy, and a little bit hypnotic, even. So, this is part of the story of Niney the Observer. I'm not going to do a full biography here. This is sort of like a music recommendation episode. I think sometimes people don't understand what I'm going for with these. I'm not really going to get that into detail. These are more like why you should check these artists out. Some people think I'm going to have like clips of their songs or whatever, which could be a disaster for some copyright reasons. I don't really want to get copyright strikes or whatever and war against these record labels. This is just like why you should look into Niney the Observer. So anyway, his nickname Niney came from when he lost a thumb in a workshop accident. That's right, he's another story like that. The guitarist for Black Sabbath is another example of somebody who had an accident and it kind of made him a little bit more of an iconic figure. And Niney the Observer is right there with him. And another one would be Django Reinhardt, who was, of course, known as the king of gypsy guitar. And he's probably still regarded as that. And he also injured his hand. So, I could almost do a special episode on people who have something like that in their tale, their life story. But anyway, this is one of those details that sticks with you. But what really matters is what he did with his ears and his mind. He started out in the late 1960s as a singer, but it didn't take long for him to find his real lane behind the scenes, kind of. And by the early 1970s, he had moved into production, and that's where things changed. More reverb and a stripped down rhythm kind of became a part of his signature style. And Niney became known for that sort of distinct sound. People called it the observer sound more than likely, and it relied heavily on early dub techniques. So think of echoing drums that seem to bounce around the room, some thick reverb that stretches a single hit into something more atmospheric, and at the core of it all was something called dub. That's really the dub experience. Dub, simply put, is when you take a track and strip away most or all of the vocals, pushing the instrumental and rhythm sections forward, and the bass, the drums, the space between sounds, that becomes the main focus. It's not just a remix, it's more like a reimagining, really. And Niney used that approach to reshape how reggae could feel. So, my favorite song that I've heard from Niney that I can think of offhand is called Blood and Fire. So, if you really want to listen to one song to, get the idea of what he's like, I would suggest that one. And then you could explore, of course, the rest of his arsenal of songs. And he worked with some of the biggest names in Jamaican music at the time, artists like Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, Max Romeo, Delroy Wilson, and Big Youth. His production gave their music a different weight, a different depth. A lot of that came from where he was working. Niney spent time at King Tubby's studio, one of the key spaces where dub music was being pushed forward. And around him were innovators like Lee Scratch Perry, who I believe I've done an episode on before. And they were all experimenting, all stretching the limits of what recorded music could do. They were innovators, and they definitely had a huge echo effect, if you will, throughout the music world. There's a quote from Niney that gives a sense of how connected that scene was. He said, I start to move with guys like Derek Morgan and Eric Monty Morris. Then me and Bunny Lee hook up. Then me and Lee Perry. Night upon night, I used to be around Andy Capp, the great WIRL studio engineer Linford Anderson. He was the greatest. I worked with every single producer in the business. After I worked with Lee, I do freelance at nighttime, and any producer who wanted a cut, I'd sell it to them. End quote. So that's a good idea of what a successful music scene looks like. You have people collaborating. I'm not saying that they always got along necessarily. Of course, you will always hear about some sort of behind the scenes rivalry or some competition. And sometimes things can get heated. That's the way people are sometimes, but you still get a sense that they were in in some ways collaborative on a large scale. They understood that there was a need to actually have a bit of a collaborative spirit, and let that be a lesson to you people out there who want to be a part of a music scene. Like, you're not going to be able to do that solo. Part of what makes it a scene is that you have working relationships, and you might even, dare I say, take chances and collaborate with people who might be considered outsiders. Hint, hint. Yeah, I'm kind of talking about myself there, because I uh I have a little bit of a problem with, I will just say, my local music scene around here, because nobody wants to do anything, and I have to play all alone most of the time these days, especially as I get older. But I know you're not here to listen to me, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of like what a successful music scene kind of requires. You need to have an ecosystem set up like that, where people with similar ideas, or even sometimes different ideas, can find ways of making things work. Constant collaboration, constant movement, and then of course specifically you can get into these rhythms that you build together. You trade ideas, shape a sound that would travel around, and in this case, it comes from Jamaica and goes around the world. And we would not have things like reggae music if these people weren't innovative and also collaborative. And that's something that I think people kind of forget. Like, all of these innovations, they don't just come out of nowhere. People have to actually take initiative, sometimes take chances, go out on a limb, and branch out to continue with the the tree like analogy here. And Niney the Observer's productions stand out because they don't feel too crowded. They feel intentional, like every echo and every dropout and every return of the bass line is doing something. So, in a way, these dub uh, people, these dub producers, were proving that you could use production sort of like a musical instrument almost. I mean, there's a very thin line between being a producer and being a musician yourself. And sometimes, producers actually are musicians, and sometimes, I mean, you actually hear about this. Sometimes they actually do add instruments themselves, like they might play on a track, and you might not even hear about it right away, but it'll be like something that comes out years later or something, and they'll be like, "Oh, I actually recorded that part on that track." So it's kind of weird. Like, you look at the album liner notes, and they sometimes don't mention everybody who was actually involved in the creation of the album. And you have to wonder, like, was it due to legal reasons that they didn't mention it, or maybe ego? Somebody didn't want to have somebody else acknowledged as being involved in the creative aspects of the album like that. I don't know. But when it comes to some of these producers, I do get a feeling that sometimes they add, instruments to them. And when it comes to Niney, he wasn't he wasn't totally on the sidelines. He was helping define a way of hearing music, and that's why people remember him today. That influence still carries through in dub music, of course, and in reggae in general, and of course also in modern electronic music and modern pop and other musical forms too, like the goth band Bauhaus. They actually have some bass lines that are done in sort of a dub style. Especially oh, I can't even remember the name of the song offhand, which is funny, but there are some bands like that where they sort of pay homage to different styles, and you might not even notice it right away, but if you actually uh, you know have a significant knowledge of music or whatever, you can pick up on these things, like these weird uh, influences that you don't detect instantly. But if you repeatedly listen to a track, you can say like, "Oh, there's actually a dub influence I can hear there," or that sounds like a little bit of classical even, or jazz. Any number of things can like actually be detected in certain musical styles. And when it comes to electronic music, dub music is very influential. A lot of pop songs have like these dub aspects to them as well. And it's really a significant thing that influenced people to include reverb, for example, and like make it so that texture matters just as much as a melody. So, Ninety the Observer is a key figure in Jamaican music history. Not always the loudest name that people mention, but one of the most important architects behind the sound. And if you listen closely, you can still hear him in the echoes and the space and the rhythm itself of, a lot of modern music. Well, I could go on and on about this, but I think I've made my point well enough known. So thanks for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Hopefully you understood what I'm trying to convey. Of course, I don't know for sure if everybody understands what I'm saying. Sometimes it seems like maybe I'm speaking a different language or something, and other people don't understand, like they need a translator. I don't know. But anyway, I will see you next time. I don't know what the next episode will be about, but it seems a little bit like I'm on a reggae kick right now, or something like that. Maybe I'll do a punk rock episode coming up soon. Maybe it'll be like, it seems like I haven't done many metal episodes lately. Maybe I'll do like a metal band at some point in the near future. Anyway, have a good one.